being here with us. Tonight we have Dr. Stephen Duffin. I heard of Dr. Duffin through Nettie, who he had spoken at her hygiene study club and said, came back, just raving about it. This is definitely the hot topic in dentistry. I'm personally very excited about this. I see a lot of patients in my population who are on medications, have xerostomia, root decay is a real big issue. So this is just revolutionary. And Dr. Coyce has been talking about it, and it's a liquid amalgam is what he calls it. So Dr. Duffin, prior to beginning his distinguished dental career, he graduated from the University of California in Los Angeles, so UCLA, with a bachelor's in microbiology. After he graduated, he attended Emory University, and that's where he got his Doctor of Dental Surgery degree in 1983. He also served as president and CEO dental director of one of the largest Medicaid provider networks in Oregon from 1994 to 2006. So, without further ado, please welcome Dr. Duffin.
It's a real pleasure to be here with you today, and I don't think I've ever spoken in such a beautiful venue. It's very nice, great audience, and I hope you enjoy the subject. It's something I'm really passionate about, and I've been involved with for well over a decade. And so we're going to share some interesting stories. And yes, I was a microbiologist. Okay, so I'm going to talk about bacteria, maybe with a little more enthusiasm than you're accustomed to hearing. But nonetheless, here we go. Again, microbiologist, I'm a general dentist, and I'm a public health advocate. And so that's why I'm here. I want you all to keep a couple of things in mind. Number one, these are new concepts, okay? And so we don't know everything. We are knowing more every day. We should keep an open mind to them. There are knowledge gaps. So there are still things that we're learning about this method of treating tooth decay. And there are large clinical trials being conducted right now to answer some of these questions. Disclosures about me. Okay, I own a dental practice, Shoreview Dental in Kaiser. I have multiple associates and hygienists that work there. It's a large practice that has a Medicaid component and a fee-for-service component. I'm very familiar with both of those worlds. Okay, I'm a partner in a medical device company that is intending to, take this to the rest of the world. And I'm the editor of a book, which I hope you all will get at the end of the year, called Smart Oral Health. Okay, it's coming. Two web resources. MMC Library, stands for Medical Management of Caries, library.com. We've been putting resources there for years. Okay, it's a huge electronic resource with scientific papers and videos and interviews and people. So if you go there, you're going to find stuff. The NODK.com, that's the medical device company, is going to talk with you about what we're doing around the world. And this is the book that is on its way, so keep your eyes open. So thank you. Where is caries a problem, in the world? And it isn't the same everywhere we're at. Okay? There are dramatic differences in this disease presentation. And so we need to have different ways for addressing it. Even here in the US, we have dramatic differences in the presentation of caries among populations. Okay. Here's a quick little PBS video. I'm kind of curious how many of you have seen this one about SDF on OPB? Okay, that's about 8 minutes.
So first, there's long been a push to promote better dental health through fluoridation and telling people to eat less sugary foods. Despite those efforts, tooth decay remains a major public health issue. In fact, it is the most common chronic childhood disease, and 90% of all adults have cavities. As many of us know, traditional treatments can often be painful, but a new, pain-free, low-cost dental treatment could help all that. Special correspondent Kat Wise has the story. It's part of our breakthrough reporting for our weekly series about the leading edge of science and technology.
It's an unmistakable stomach-churning sound, the high-pitched whir of the dentist drill. For more than a century, it's been one of the main tools in the battle against tooth decay.
The standard drill and fill treatment is not a lot of fun for anyone, but for some patients, especially young children who often have to be sedated or put under, it can be very challenging and even dangerous. But the silvery liquid in this little bottle has started to lead to some big changes in the way some tooth decay is being treated.
We started in 2013 using this, and it's, in 35 years, I have not seen anything that's worked as well. Hey, Marie.
Dr. Frank Mendoza is a pediatric dentist on the Warm Springs Indian Reservation in Central Oregon. He is one of a small but growing number of dentists who've begun using silver nitrate, a widely used liquid antimicrobial medical treatment with fluoride varnish, a widely used dental product, to stop tooth decay. The treatment is for cavities which haven't reached the pulp of the tooth.
The silver kills the bacteria and stops new bacteria from growing. The fluoride remineralizes or hardens what's left. That hard material then can be used to, you can actually bond or stick a lot of filling material with that.
On a recent morning, 13-month-old Xavian Walulatum and his siblings paid a visit to Dr. Mendoza. Xavian has 8 teeth so far, and despite his family's best efforts to keep them healthy, 4 have cavities. 3 months ago, Dr. Mendoza began the first of several treatments. The cavities have been stopped, and as of now, no new ones have formed. The black spots on his teeth are actually the silver doing its job on the decay. The staining is the main drawback of the treatment, which has been used in other countries and which has been shown to be safe in studies.
Good, we're good. Okay.
6-year-old Sylvia is also getting treatments,
Okay, so first of all, let's see how your teeth are looking.
and so far her cavities are under control too. But older brother Frederick, who developed cavities as a toddler before Dr. Mendoza began using silver in his practice, ended up under general anesthesia in the hospital. That's a common story for young children in Warm Springs and in tribal communities around the country, which have high rates of dental decay.
Over half of the kids went to the hospital up until we started this silver nitrate project 4 years ago. We've seen about half as many kids requiring OR treatment since then. And we've changed nothing other than add this to our program.
The dark spots can eventually be covered with tooth-colored material, and when the baby teeth fall out, the stains go away too.
Okay.
Mom Nancy Walulatum says she doesn't like the stains, but she believes the treatment has kept her younger children from having more invasive work done.
It's really fast. They just come in and go out and then we're done. I think that it's really helping them, preventing them to not go through surgery.
Preventing kids from being put under or sedated has become a priority in the dental world. The authors of a recent article in the journal Pediatrics wrote, an estimated 100 to 250,000 pediatric dental sedations are performed annually in the U.S., and they highlighted the case of a 4-year-old boy who died after sedation in his dentist's office. But they noted it's difficult to track adverse events or deaths because there's no mandated reporting. The article's authors joined an expanding group of dental experts, including the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, who say a treatment that combines silver and fluoride can be effective in appropriate cases. The formula, called silver diamine fluoride, or SDF, was cleared by the FDA last year for reducing sensitivities in teeth. But its so-called off-label use for stopping cavities is now its main use. The treatment is much cheaper than drilling, typically about $30 per visit. Some state Medicaid plans and an increasing number of private insurance providers are now covering it. But a lot of questions remain, including why SDF works only about 80% of the time.
It works on most cavities. The problem is it doesn't work on all cavities.
One of those on the front lines of SDF research is Dr. Jeremy Horst, a pediatric dentist and a postdoc fellow at the University of California, San Francisco. He and his colleagues are studying, among other things, the structural and chemical changes in teeth before and after they've been treated with silver products.
We completed a short-term study which blew our minds. It didn't look like the bacteria changed very much at all. There were just dramatically less of them. So it decreased the infection dramatically. That was when it worked. So we need to look longer term, and we need to look at cavities that didn't stop. Are there certain bacteria that are making the infection, this cavity in the tooth, still grow?
Dr. Horst is also studying how often silver products need to be reapplied to be effective. And he's using extremely high-res x-rays of treated teeth to uncover how the silver and fluoride seen in red in this photo work their magic.
So this is a bit of a tooth that we've imaged So the dark area is the cavity. The surprising thing is that the silver penetrates down into the inner part of the tooth pretty well as far as the cavity goes, or sometimes beyond, and reinforces it, strengthens it, increases its hardness.
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing. Teeth should be hard.
UCSF is teaching both pediatric and general dentistry students about SDF, but it's not universally taught or practiced around the country yet. There are others, though, who could benefit if the treatment spread. 61-year-old Kaiser, Oregon resident Robert Block had a stroke 12 years ago that made it difficult for him to care for himself and his teeth. Dental decay is a problem for many older adults, especially those in nursing homes where it can be tough to get dental care.
Hello, Robert. Hey, so good to see you again.
Block began getting treatments from a local dentist who was one of the first to try using silver more than a decade ago, Dr. Steve Duffin.
We just put silver compounds on all of his teeth, and I'll never forget, he came back 3 months later, I looked in his mouth, and he had no plaque on his teeth. His gums were healthy. He looked like a different person.
Dr. Duffin, who discovered in an old dental textbook that silver nitrate was actually used in this country for a time in the early 1900s, believes what was old is new again, for everyone.
I personally believe that this is the appropriate treatment for every person who has tooth decay, because it is the most effective way to treat the disease, regardless of income.
Are you going to school after this?
In Oregon, the treatment has been approved to be used by hygienists and qualified dental assistants, and Dr. Duffin says that could have a major impact on access to dental care. Back in Warm Springs, Dr. Mendoza says prevention of cavities should always be the focus, but when needed, silver is making a difference.
I won't ever go back to the same way of doing it. I don't think parents will allow me, because they know that there's another way to do it. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to stop everything. You need follow-up. You need to start it early.
Later this year, the American Dental Association plans to release a clinical practice guideline on all non-surgical approaches to cavities, including SDF. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Kat Wise in Warm Springs, Oregon.
It's nice to know that that report's been released now. And we continue to see more and more information about this method of treating tooth decay. So let's talk about what SDF is, first of all, okay? What is silver diamine fluoride? It's a colorless liquid. If you haven't seen it before, it's composed of 25%, now I'm talking by weight, 25% silver ion, 5% fluoride ion, 8% ammonia, and 62% water. That's what it is. That's what's in the bottle, okay? What's important is that the silver is in ionic form, okay? It is single atoms floating around. Let's talk about chemistry for a minute, okay? Why do atoms react with each other? They react because the electrons in the outermost shell are either full or not full. What's really interesting about silver and fluoride is that in the case of silver, there's only one electron in the outermost shell, okay? So when we think of silver, it's usually Ag positive, right? Positive ion. It's because silver wants to give up that electron, get rid of it, so that its outermost shell is then full. Okay, that's why silver is so reactive. It's because of that one electron. Now let's look at fluorine. Fluorine is exactly the opposite, okay? It is missing an electron in the outermost shell, and that's why it is so reactive. So it's so interesting that now we have silver and we have fluorine working together, and it's probably has a lot to do with the fact that they're very reactive elements. I like this microphotograph because it shows a case of bacteria that have absorbed silver, okay? And the silver has attached itself to intracellular structures such as enzymes, proteins, other things, okay? And ultimately, the silver inactivates the ability of that bacterial cell to metabolize, and it dies. It falls apart. Has anyone heard of the zombie effect here before? Okay. The zombie effect is that when the bacterium dies, the silver doesn't go away, right? It's the one thing that sticks around in the environment and just waits for the next bacteria to come along. And so we can treat bacteria, but as long as silver stays, and we'll come back to this subject later, as long as it stays in the tooth, stays in the environment, it can continue to protect. So a couple of precautions. Number one, silver nitrate and silver diamine fluoride stain everything. Okay, if you get it on your fingers, you're going to have dark fingers, I know. If you get it on your clothes, you're going to want to throw the clothes away. You get on the countertop, good luck. Okay, it stains everything. It's very caustic, pH 11. So we would not want a drop of SDF in the child's eyes. This is the one thing that I'm the most concerned about when I'm treating a patient, is eyewear. You know, I've had children that have had dark spots on their cheeks and their fingers, and I've had stains everywhere, but I have never had an injury to the eye, because we always have eyewear, pH 11. So always remember that. The other thing that we do is we put a little bit of Vaseline on the lips. Okay, you have to be careful, and some clinicians think that you should put Vaseline on the gums and everywhere except where it's going to go. I think that's overkill. We just put a little Vaseline on the lips because inevitably, with the microbrush going in and out, it's going to touch the lips. So that's how we prepare. This is my hand. Okay, you can see this dark spot on your right. Okay. Well, that's because I wasn't gloved and I was taking the lid off of a bottle. And this is photoactive, so you won't notice it when it happens, but you'll go outside and the sun shines and boom, you'll see it. Well, 4 days later, it's gone. All right, so this kind of staining is only temporary. It's not a big deal. So where did it come from? This is a really fascinating story. So Mizuho Nishino was a pediatric, still alive, pediatric dentist in 1965, earning her PhD in the laboratory of Yamaga. And she is the first person to really put together the idea of silver ion and fluoride ion. And so the first iteration of silver fluoride was developed in the laboratory of Yamaga in the 1960s. And the first product is the Saferide product, which you may have heard from Japan in 1972. So this is how it all got started. And by the way, I got a bottle of that stuff smuggled into America 15 years ago. And that's how I got started with Saferide. So once again, I'm doing a pitch for the MMC library. Again, it's a free open source library. If you want to know more about this stuff, just go there. It's a lot of material. And by the way, if you look at this website, on the upper left-hand corner, it says FDA process, okay? Well, if you hit that tab, you're going to hear a 45-minute lecture by Peter Milgram and Mike Shercliffe, who are the two people who brought SDF to America, okay? And it's a great story, and it talks about what they had to do to get the FDA to approve it, et cetera, and it's well worth listening to. So where has SDF been used? It's been used really all over the world. I mean, we know it was invented in Japan. Ironically, it is not used frequently in Japan now, but it's been in Brazil, and it's been all over the world. And now it's here in the US. And when we say approved, we mean cleared to market. The FDA has cleared SDF to be marketed legally here in the United States. Its indication is for sensitivity and as a cavity liner, not as a caries arrest agent. So we have to be very clear that when we talk about it for caries arrest, that's an off-label description. Now, there are two big studies going on, one in New York and one in Michigan, that is going to look at the safety and efficacy of SDF as a caries arrest agent. And it's going to probably be 3 or 4 years from now until that process is finished. But the hope is that when the data, the internal US data, apparently the data from Brazil or Mexico doesn't work, so anyway, we have to do it ourselves over again. When that data comes out, I'm pretty sure that the FDA is going to approve this, and we'll have, for the first time, a drug for treating tooth decay. So I'm going to tell you about some of the places that I've been. And if I'm looking a little wobbly here, it's because I just got back from Bolivia, and I'm not even sure what time zone I'm in. And as soon as I got back from Bolivia, I went to San Francisco to the Global Oral Health Symposium. So I think yesterday, I'm not sure, I just got back from San Francisco. So we're all talking about SDF and caries and where it goes in the world. Now this was in Chapare, Bolivia. Sandy Kemper is a dental hygienist in the Seattle area that has created the first dental hygiene program in Latin America. In Cochabamba, Bolivia, almost 20 years ago, not sure exactly. And she invited me to come to Bolivia to introduce SDF to her program and the children that are being treated there. So again, thank you, Sandy. And her organization is called the Smiles Forever Foundation. This quick little video showing two hygienists treating a child with proper eyewear. You notice the SDF is going on, and then the fluoride varnish is going on. Okay. The perfect protocol has not been worked out, but I feel pretty strongly that the process of carefully cleaning the tooth, drying the lesion so that the saliva is gone, applying SDF liberally to the lesion, and then covering it with varnish is a very good protocol. That's the best that I know right now, and we're getting well over 90% success in our trials. So, why is this an important subject? Well, this poor kid is what half the kids look like in Bolivia. It's just astonishing, the severity of the disease that we saw there was just incredible. Here in the U.S., we've got all kinds of cool technology, and we're in the heart of the technology center of dentistry in America, right here in this building. So I don't want to criticize that. I enjoyed walking around and seeing the history and all the beauty that's here, and I want to recognize that. Okay, but the reality is we have all of this fancy technology, okay, and we're still seeing caries moving forward. So we need to think about the disease a little bit differently. Another quick little interview with them all.
So I'm here with Susanna and her two children, and she's going to tell us a story about dental work with the daughter and her son.
So my daughter's here, she's 11. She had a lot of dental work when she was younger though. She had so many cavities where she had to go to the dentist's office more than a few times, and so she was really scared. She was crying and yelling. She had to get drills and needles and put to sleep because she cried and screamed so much while the dentist was doing her work. And I really like the idea of my son's experience now with the no shots, no needles, no drills. He's really more happier to come to the dentist's office than when I experienced with her. She didn't even want to go to the dentist's office, and I would have to bribe her and buy her things just to get her to go. And so I like the idea that when he comes, he doesn't even scream or yell. He just comes in and we leave. He gets his sticker. And he goes out early.
Right.
The experience I have with him is a lot better than when I had with my daughter.
Wonderful. We're very happy that you came to see us. Do you think other families would be interested in this approach as well?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I'm already telling my friends and family about it, and I love the idea where he walks out really happy.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing your message.
So it's hard to say how many times I've had this exact conversation with families, okay, especially with children, and it's just I'm so happy to see this kind of result. So let's think about caries for a moment. Caries is a bacterial infectious disease with a behavioral component. No question about that. For some reason, dentistry seems to live in these two camps, okay? If the people that think about the bacteria and the people that think about motivational interviewing. Okay, I've taken every motivational interviewing class known to man. I believe in it. I believe that we need to get people, we need to legislate less sugar. We need to do all those sort of things, okay? But we need to understand both of these sides. Only thinking about one side isn't going to be enough. So let's talk about two different pathways here. Number one is the social determinants of disease. Many of you may have read this. This is the masterpiece, in my view, textbook on this subject. And we need to educate ourselves about, how we can work with communities and help to educate people to manage their own disease. Okay. Then the other side is the microbiology. Okay. Who was the first oral microbiologist? Well, in my opinion, it was Leeuwenhoek, the inventor of the microscope, the first human being that ever saw a bacterium. That's him, okay? And what did he describe? Bacteria from his own mouth, okay? Way back when. It's amazing. So I'm gonna jump forward a little bit in time. Willoughby D. Miller, okay? I never heard of this guy when I was in dental school. It's amazing to me. Okay, he is definitely one of the most important dentists that we have in our profession, have ever had. And the situation is he was a dentist living in Berlin, Germany, in the 1880s and working in the laboratory of Robert Koch. And so he was sitting there watching them discover the source of all these infectious diseases, okay? And then he was going to his little private practice and growing bugs on the side. And he wrote a book called The Microorganisms of the Human Mouth. Now, I don't know how I managed to go through dental school and never hear about this book. This is one of the most important books ever written. And it was published in 1890. It's incredible. W.D. Miller, again, this entire manuscript is on the MMC library. So if you can't find the book or you don't want to buy a copy or whatever, you can read it electronically on the MMC library. I highly recommend it, okay? What I found really jumped out at me is that Miller was testing different materials to kill bacteria in the 1880s. And what he found is that the most effective agent was mercury. Well, he also knew that mercury was poisonous, and we're not going to put mercury in people's mouths. Oh, we do that, or we did. I'm sorry that I brought that up. Just forget that. Okay, he knew that mercury was not good. The second most effective thing that he tested, silver nitrate. And they knew that and published it in 1890. The next guy to come along, good old G.V. Black, okay? Father of modern dentistry. Well, G.V. Black wrote this incredible volume, published in 1908, The Pathologies of the Hard Tissues of the Teeth. I don't know why he called it that, okay? But it's a massive tome about dentistry. And what did G.V. Black treat caries with in 1908? Silver nitrate. Especially the entire chapter on children's dentistry is about how to use silver nitrate to stop tooth decay, 1908. And then along comes Percy Howe, who is the first research director of the Forsyth Institute, who taught to use silver nitrate between 1917 and 1950. In fact, silver nitrate was so popular during this period of time that if you wanted to get some, you would order Howe's solution. It was named after this guy, okay, Percy Howe. It was called Howe's solution, as all it was silver nitrate. Okay, so these three guys, Miller, Black, and Howe, were all saying the same thing. Manage tooth decay with medicine. What's the medicine? Silver. Did they know how it worked? No, they had no idea. Okay, but they know it did work and they documented a long time ago. So this is what they had in common. Now let's jump forward just a little bit forward. So 1915, okay, G.V. Black is invited to come to Colorado Springs to help figure out why these people have brown spots on their teeth. Colorado brown stain, remember that story? Okay, Frederick McKay. And G.V. Black was part of the whole beginning of the fluoride story. We had this ironic situation where people had some staining on their teeth, but they also didn't get cavities. You know, what's that all about? They eventually figured out that it was fluorosis, too much fluoride in the water. So G.V. Black was at the very beginning of the story of silver and the story of fluoride. Isn't that interesting? And then it wasn't until we go to fast forward to 1965 that these two compounds are put together in Japan to create a product that has attributes of both. So now we're seeing this everywhere, okay? It's on all the journals. We're seeing SDF pop up everywhere. We'll continue to see that, especially because of these two big FDA trials that are going on in Michigan and New York. So let's just revisit for a moment, you know, what causes this mess. This is an actual patient of mine in my office in Kaiser, okay? So if we don't control this problem early, we have this kind of a problem solved, which is almost unsolvable. So this is a quick TED Talk by Karen Sokol Gutierrez. How many of you know who she is? It's okay if nobody knows this, all right? That's why I'm here, okay? It actually makes me feel better if you don't raise your hand. Karen is a remarkable person. She's a pediatrician and a public health advocate at UC Berkeley. And she is very much aware of the problem of oral disease in young children and how mouth pain can contribute to lack of thriving, lack of eating, lack of academic performance, etc. And so she kind of sought me out. I'd never heard of her before. And she found there's this crazy dentist running around talking about using medicine for tooth decay. And so that's how we got hooked up. And I was with her in San Francisco about 3 days ago. I don't know. So anyway, great TED Talk.
I want to tell you about a disease that has been skyrocketing over recent decades. It is a pandemic, a global epidemic. According to the World Health Organization, it is the most common chronic disease of childhood, affecting 60 to 90% of children, far more than any other disease. What is it? It's tooth decay. You may wonder, how bad can that be? Well, if you've had good nutrition, you drink fluoridated water, you brush and floss daily, and you get regular dental care, you may not have suffered from tooth decay. But I will tell you about the children who are suffering, and I'll show you their photos, which may be painful to see. You'll learn how widespread and severe tooth decay is, how it can affect children's overall health, what causes it, and what we need to do to prevent it. First, a disclaimer: I'm not a dentist. I'm a medical doctor with training in pediatrics and public health. But I've witnessed this pandemic firsthand, and I've had to learn about oral health so that I could help address what I now believe is the greatest threat to children's health around the world. 35 years ago, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in a town in rural Ecuador. Although there were many diseases, the children had healthy teeth. They ate straight from the farm: whole grains, fresh fruit, vegetables, milk, eggs, and meat. They only rarely had candy or soda. But 20 years later, when I returned to work in Latin America, this is what I saw. I was shocked. The mothers told me, "My children's teeth are rotten. They complain of pain all the time. They can't eat. They can't sleep. They can't play. They can't concentrate in school." What is causing this? The grandmothers explained, the young people have moved away from our traditional foods. Now they just eat sweets. The old market sold fresh fruits and vegetables. The new market sold the modern processed snack foods and drinks. Worldwide, health experts have raised the alarm that children's increased consumption of junk food is driving pandemics of obesity, of type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. But the resulting pandemic of tooth decay has been tragically neglected. Numerous studies have shown that frequent consumption of sweets and carbohydrates in food and drinks causes tooth decay, and the global increase in the consumption of junk food is driving the pandemic of tooth decay. In response, over the past 10 years, we've harnessed the passion and volunteerism of over 100 students and health professionals to start the Children's Oral Health and Nutrition Project, a collaboration among university, nonprofit, and governmental partners in El Salvador, Ecuador, Peru, Vietnam, Nepal, and India. This is what we've seen. Junk food is everywhere, even in the remote villages, and the children's beautiful smiles are being devastated. This is starting within the first few years of life. Many parents are giving their babies candy and chips and soda in the baby bottle. By 1 to 2 years of age, many children already have tooth decay. By 3 to 4, many are suffering from mouth pain. And by 5 to 6, most have tooth decay and mouth pain. As parents, We all want what's best for our children. Many parents have told me that they grew up poor, and now when they have a little extra money, they want to buy treats for their children. And the snack food treats are cheap, often cheaper than healthy food. And where the water supply is contaminated, soda is often sold cheaper than bottled water. Plus, the snack food ads say they're healthy for children. They make your children taller, stronger, sharper, think better. They're good fun and they open happiness. So, with the very low price and the very seductive ads, are parents who are poor and uneducated tricked into buying these treats for their children? And what happens when a once-in-a-while treat becomes an everyday staple of the diet? Many parents have told me that when they give their children small sweet snacks all day, the children stop eating real food. But children need real food to grow. When children are given junk food instead of real food, it causes severe tooth decay and malnutrition. This is a 5-year-old child from Latin America whose family owned the town store. He had a continual supply of junk food. All of his teeth were decayed. He had mouth pain. He had difficulty eating, which compounded the cycle of malnutrition. And at 5 years of age, he was the size of a 2-year-old. He was not ready to learn in school. Clearly, our children with tooth decay need dental treatment. But now that we have so many children with so many decayed teeth, we don't have enough dentists to treat them all. And our children should not have to suffer from mouth pain. In fact, tooth decay is entirely preventable, and the only way to stop this pandemic is through prevention. Is this possible in the developing world? Yes. Our project, now in 6 countries, is providing prevention services from birth, education on nutrition and oral health for health workers, parents, and children, toothbrushes and fluoride toothpaste for all family members, fluoride varnish applied to children's teeth 2 to 3 times per year, and referrals to dental care for children with tooth decay. And prevention is inexpensive. The supplies cost less than $5 per child per year. That's less than the families tell us they spend each month on junk food. And it's a lot less than the cost of dental treatment. In fact, preventing even 1 cavity per child per year saves money. So as you see, we're working at the grassroots level with health workers and families from community to community, and we're seeing improvements in mothers' knowledge and practices and improvements in children's oral health and nutrition. But we can only reach a small fraction of the children in need. To stop this pandemic, we need to address the causes. We need you to urge politicians and business leaders to make high-level policy changes to ensure truth in advertising, to limit children's access to cheap, unhealthy food, and to increase access to affordable, healthy food and clean water. So for now, we'll celebrate our successes. Here are some of our thousands of participating children who are cavity-free, well-nourished, and smiling. I want to leave you with a statement from a Salvadorian mother whose children participated in our program from birth. She said, "We used to think there was nothing we could do about our children's rotten teeth and mouth pain. It was just a fact of life here. But now, childhood doesn't have to be a time of pain and malnutrition. It can be a time of good health and happiness." This is what I believe all children in the world deserve. I believe it is possible, and we must work toward this goal. If we don't act now, we'll have a future where children do not have teeth and cannot smile. We must give our children back their smiles and good health. Thank you.
So Karen is a remarkable person in every way and a great leader, and she's sharing the message around the world. And so I hope that we'll all see more of her and this message as we go forward. So I want to go back in time. I keep going back and forth and back in time. Okay, so Weston Price was a dentist, U.S. Based, I think, in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the 1920s and 30s, who got really curious about tooth decay and who had tooth decay and why they had it. And he wrote this book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. I want to say that I am not recommending you read this book. I'm not promoting this. There are a lot of things that Weston Price said and did that I'm not really happy about, okay? But in the middle of all that, he's the first person that really identified the connection on a population level between sugar and caries, okay? So let's kind of follow his trick. He went all around the world. I mean, he's a regular dentist. He would take a few months off and he'd go to New Guinea and he would go to India and go all over the world. And he's studying people with cavities and people without cavities. And he collected this amazing database, okay? One of the places that he went was Copacabana, Bolivia, which is on Lake Titicaca, and that's where I was at a few months ago, okay? And it was interesting to sit there, look down at the city, and realize that Weston Price was a few miles away 100 years ago, studying tooth decay in that population, okay? And what he found is that children who have cavities were eating sugar, period. And that the people that had no decay were simply not eating sugar. He demonstrated that very, very clearly, even without all of the gadgets and fancy things that we have today. Okay, so what I found surprising, okay, is that when he was studying populations with no decay, had no cavities at all, those people, there were no dentists there. There were no dental hygienists. Those people didn't have toothbrushes. They didn't have toothpaste or floss, but they didn't have tooth decay, okay? So there's a big disconnect that we needed to think about. And, you know, is that still true? But we know that the connection is between sugar and cavities without question. I want to shift now, come forward a little bit and talk about this gentleman. Bill Costerton was a medical microbiologist, okay? His entire career, nobody in the dental community has ever heard of him before, but he wrote this paper in 1978 in Scientific American, How Bacteria Stick. Does that kind of sound like dental plaque? Sticky? Okay? He used dental plaque as his example, okay, in this article, which nobody knows about, or the dental profession didn't know about, that explained biofilm, okay? Complex communities of bacteria living in, on the surface of teeth. So he stated that the biofilm in an individual is as unique as their fingerprint. We now know that there are hundreds of different species of bacteria that inhabit the mouth, that each of us have a different collection, okay, just like a fingerprint. In Costerton's time, it's when molecular biology was coming along. We're starting to be able to use DNA techniques, not just culture techniques, but identify exactly what these bacteria were, okay? The vast majority of bacteria that were identified living in the mouth have not been cultured, okay? If they haven't been cultured, we don't know anything about their microbiology, their metabolism, none of these sort of things, okay? So we got to realize that what's going on in our mouths is still a big gap in our knowledge, big gap. And yet, I love this image. This is an image of subgingival biofilm. Isn't that amazingly complex communities that these bacteria form? It's incredible. So if you're interested in Bill Costerton, you can go to MMC Library, and I have a lecture that he gave that's really wonderful to hear it straight from the man himself telling the story. So I encourage you to go and watch the Costerton video. Next person that comes along is Phil Marsh. Okay, Phil Marsh is a microbiologist in England who is the author of the most commonly used textbook in dentistry titled Oral Microbiology. Phil Marsh wrote a paper in 2003 with the totally awful title of, pardon me, Phil, but Are Dental Diseases Examples of Ecologic Catastrophes? Okay, that just makes you want to grab it up and read it right away, right? So it was his theory that it is, when this complex community of bacteria comes out of balance when we see caries and periodontal. It's a very important paper. So as we think about this, is the problem sugar or is the problem acid? Well, it's not that simple. They're all related, okay? Where does the acid come from? It comes from the drink itself right now, right? Okay? Even if it says diet on it, just put a pH paper in there. You'll see what, okay, acid, and then the bacteria make more acid. I also have a wonderful lecture by Phil Marsh, okay, on the MMC library, talking about his topic. And many of you may actually have this book, okay? This is the most common textbook used in dental school dental hygiene programs around the world on oral microbiology.
My name is Jeremy Horst. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in the Derisi lab here at UCSF in Mission Bay. So I'm a pediatric dentist and biochemist, and putting those two things together, I've been focused for a long time on figuring out how to stop cavities from happening, especially in really young children and disabled people for which getting a filling, which is pretty routine for most of us, would really affect their lives dramatically. And so I study the bacteria that cause cavities. And I'm trying to figure out what could prevent them, what could stop them, what we can do in terms of a natural intervention, such as eating more healthy or taking certain vitamins that could allow our bacteria to grow in a more healthy way, so that in particular the folks that are really affected by cavities wouldn't have to deal with that. All the time, kids are put to sleep in the hospital under general anesthesia to get their teeth worked on. And it's a totally preventable disease, so it seems kind of silly. So here I'm using all the resources that we have at UCSF, molecular analysis, structure of proteins, drug discovery, looking at what small molecules, what bacteria, what genes, what foods we could use to keep people healthy. So I was born and raised here in San Francisco, so it's nice to still be around home. I grew up doing a paper route and just kind of got interested in what it was to work from a young age. Talked to a lot of people about what they did. And I started getting interested in the medical field just because the ability to help people, work with people, not sit behind a computer all the time, and ask lots of questions. I was just really curious. So that's why I started going into science, was that there was no answer to some of my questions. Usually in the laboratory, I'm doing two different things. One is that I grow these bacteria that cause cavities and do different things to them to see how it affects their ability to grow and how they make acid, because cavities are pretty simple. Bacteria get exposed to sugar, they turn it into acid, the acid dissolves the tooth, that hole is a cavity. So I basically grow these bacteria and see how they make acid, how they change the pH. And so I might put in a drug or a vitamin or a gene to block some part of their metabolism. I might put two bacteria together and watch how they grow. Those kinds of things. So specific, I bring it out the freezer, I put a little, basically some water on it, get those bacteria swimming around, and then expose them to broth that smells a lot like top ramen, and incubate them, which just means put them in higher temperature, like body temperature, and then take out little samples and put them in some of the different machines we have to see how many bacteria are in there and what the pH is. Stick a little pH probe like you have in your high school chemistry lab into the sample. And I also am looking at the genes in these bacteria, how they turn them on, which genes they have. So I'll grow up a whole bunch of the bacteria and then take their DNA and then prepare it for our sequencing machine, where it'll read out every single letter the genome, of the genes that give the blueprints of life to these bacteria, and see which ones are turned on and which ones are turned off when they're making lots of acid or when they get exposed to a drug that stops them from making acid. And so then there's some time at the computer figuring out all that stuff lines up and putting all the pieces together. I guess that's missing an important part, which is talking to other people. And so a lot of the science world is about talking to other people that have other ideas, sharing your work with each other. So everyone that I've found has been very welcoming. If you're curious and you're willing to work a little bit hard to ask your questions, if you find yourself curious and you poke around the internet to look for the answer to your questions, that's what we do. Science is filled with people that just started asking questions, and then it's our job as sort of maturing scientists, as people along the way, to take care of the new folks. So there's always sort of a continuum of people just coming into science, whether they're in high school or in college or after college, and people that are a couple steps ahead that bring younger students along to train them in the specific skills, whether it's moving around little bits of liquid or sequencing their DNA or writing computer programs or bashing on things to see how hard they can take it. That's what we do. From professors to research scientists and postdoctoral fellows on down, we all train each other. And so it's a very welcoming environment from any walk of life. So really why I got here was just asking questions and being curious. And I think that's really what defines us as humans. Everybody's curious. You see something you don't understand, you want to look into it and figure it out.
So basically, if you see anything written by Jeremy Horst, read it, okay? He is definitely at the forefront of learning how this stuff works, and is really pushing back the boundaries. So it's a real privilege to know him and to have walked through that lab with him and to see him. We're gonna have questions at the end, but if you really want.
I just wanted to make a comment.
Yeah.
I mean, he sounds like he's like a super, like geek as far as, you know, science goes, but he's a really good speaker too. So if you get an opportunity to hear him speak, he's a really good speaker.
Yeah, he's a remarkable person in every way.
I got the ODC or something to see Jeremy Horst. Sign up for
There you go. Okay. So talk about a couple of places, Bolivia and Ghana, different parts of the world, totally different experiences in terms of caries. And I have a little map of the whole world over here. And there are areas where cavities are the big problem, and it's not so big a problem. And why is that different? We're going to try to figure that out. Okay. So we went to Ghana. We collected salivary samples. We collected plaque samples. We looked at what's going on in the mouths of children in Ghana. We went to Bolivia. We looked at those kids, okay? And we have this guy helping us figure out what it all means, okay? So that's what science is all about. So we're learning together. The other thing from this picture right here, there's Jeremy in his lab. These images are from the synchrotron at UC Berkeley, which is one of the most powerful physics laboratories on the planet, okay? It's been around since the 1930s. And we are now using it to analyze teeth that have been treated with SDF and with GIC and then exfoliated. And so we're using some of the most powerful equipment in the world to help us answer these kind of questions. And Jeremy talked about this image right here. This is an image of an exfoliated primary tooth with a giant cavitation. This shows the silver that has gone into the dental tubules and occluded the area entirely, okay? And so asking exactly how this happens, we use this incredible equipment to do that. We're gonna come back to this. This is Clara's tooth. This is a tooth of a young girl who was treated with SDF, and then GIC was placed on the facial to mask the scar, and then we simply waited until the tooth exfoliated, and we sent it to Jeremy, and he did the imaging for it. So now let's go back in time, okay, once again. Alexander Fleming, 1928, okay, remember why that guy's famous? Okay, penicillin is discovered. So I was at IADR pretty much exactly 1 year ago in London, and I talked my wife into going with me. We're going to have a couple of days. We hadn't been to London before, and so we're getting ready to get off the plane, and she knew where we were, where our hotel was. Everything was all set, and I said, well, I just want to stop on the way to the hotel, okay? And we've just been in an airplane for 16 hours. I just want to stop real quickly at the Alexander Fleming Museum. Okay, so the very laboratory where he discovered penicillin is there and has been reconstructed, and you can walk in there and imagine what it was like to discover penicillin in 1928. The whole world has changed, right? So imagine not having antibiotics. How many of us would not be here? Okay. Okay, antibiotics have changed the trajectory of human history in a profound way. And so this discovery that medicine can be used has changed the way medicine was practiced, okay? Now, let's say that you're a physician and a patient walks in and says, I've got a little problem, can you fix it? Okay? Okay, and do you think the physician will say, yeah, let's just sew that up, right? Does that look like we can sew that up? Or maybe we should treat the infection first, right? That makes sense, okay? So control the infection first. That's a no-brainer, okay? But what do we do in dentistry? What's this? We get out a drill, okay? We try to solve an infection with a surgical approach. That's the way I was taught, okay? Many dentists think that, okay, but I'm challenging it. I'm saying, hold on, this is an infection. If we have an effective medicine to control it, maybe we should do that first, okay? So, again, dentistry is largely a surgical profession. You know, why don't we have penicillin for caries? Well, maybe we do. Maybe we have something like this, okay? So, I'm going to show you some images from my practice. You can tell that these are old pictures because I actually had hair, okay? But I've found when I started using SDF that my entire practice changed. So my ability to interact with children, to treat caries earlier, or before I was going to the hospital, okay? To treat young children under general anesthesia, that just stopped. That just stopped. I'd done it for who knows how many years, okay? And when I introduced SDF a year later, I realized I don't go to the OR anymore because I don't have to treat children that way, okay? So what's the protocol? Number one, here's an example of an arrested lesion that's been treated with silver, okay? Number one, we do an antimicrobial step. So we clean the tooth, we apply SDF, we cover it with varnish. We do that a couple of times. So I found that I have a lot more success if I do 2 or 3 applications over 1 to 2 months. Okay, I was getting like 80% success. Now I'm getting 95, 98% success by doing multiple applications and covering it with varnish. Okay, during that time, I have a time to do the motivational interviewing to talk about the disease. Okay, because the patients know they're going to come back. So many patients think, okay, I'm going to go to the dentist, they're going to fix me, and then I'm going to go home. So we had to change that whole paradigm so that we're educating people. Okay, this is the disease, this is how the disease happens, this is how we're going to treat it, this is how you should think about changing your behaviors, etc. Okay? And the last thing we do is restorations. Yes, restorations are necessary. If there's a big hole in the tooth, you can't leave it that way. I'm not suggesting that we do that. Okay? So what do you need? Here's the caries arrest setup. You need everything on this tray except the Explorer. I have a great video of me standing on the deck at my office, which is right next to a lake, with the Explorer, throwing it into the lake. We just don't need this anymore, okay? So, in any event, you don't need a whole lot of stuff to stop tooth decay. Here's a close-up image of the application. These are old pictures. This is silver nitrate. This is before SDF was in the US, okay? And covering it by fluoride varnish. Why do we cover it by fluoride varnish? Number one, the stuff tastes terrible, okay? So we want to cover the taste. Number two is that silver is going to attach to whatever is closest, okay? And saliva is full of protein, and it's oftentimes easier for the silver, even though you put it on the tooth, to end up in the saliva and get swallowed. So it's another reason, in my view, the most important reason for putting the varnish is to protect the treated site. Okay, here's a quick little video.
Open as big as you can. Ah! Good job.
So,
Open.
you train the entire mouth in about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, open. One more, okay? You're doing so good.
Watch they stop. No, they don't put the SDF under. They don't put the varnish. Why? There's saliva contamination. So stop, dry it. So if you see saliva contamination, always
Good job. There we go. Perfect, doctor.
Good.
So here's a kid with decay in 4 quadrants. Was treated. We're done. Okay. So the next thing is, what if you have a cavitation, okay, or you have an aesthetic issue? I'm going to talk about the aesthetics later, but if you have a large cavitation, okay, then you need to place a restoration. What I found is the combination of caries arrest with silver ion compounds followed by glass ionomer cement is great. Glass ionomer cements bond very well to the silver treated surface. You don't have to worry about that not being true. That's been well tested. Okay. What about aesthetics? Okay, here's a facial. It's not very pretty. What I found is that you totally desensitize that tooth when you place silver nitrate or silver diamine fluoride. And so you can go in with a round burr and just remove most of that black arrested decay and place a glass ionomer cement with no anesthetic, no anesthesia. So patients like that a lot. This is Robert that was in the video earlier. I've been treating Robert for about 5 years. Okay, so I saw him when it was a disaster and he had new decay and he had acute gingivitis and just, it was a mess. And then we got SDF, and one day I decided, and I talked to Robert about this, and I said, I don't know what'll happen, but why don't we just paint this on all of your teeth, okay? Not just the cavities, let's just paint it on all your teeth and cover it with varnish. And he said, yeah, I don't care. And so he went home, and I remember that this was a month later, because I was seeing him every month. Okay? A month after the treatment, he came in, he opened his mouth, and that's what I saw. I was so astonished by what I'm seeing here, because look at the gums. I had been looking at him for 6 years with acute gingivitis, bleeding gums. He couldn't brush his teeth at all. He never brushed his teeth. Okay? And all I did was put SDF and fluoride varnish on his teeth once, and a month later, he presents like this. That's a miracle. Something pretty amazing is going on here. Okay, this is the most physically challenged patient fragile patient I've ever worked with. Natalia had had a spinal cord injury. She's in a wheelchair with a respirator. When her mother brought her into my office, this is in the waiting room here, okay? And I'll never forget, we started treating her caries with silver nitrate, didn't have SDF at this time, okay? She was in my waiting room and the battery to her respirator died. And they had to run out and get a spare battery out of the car, and we had to bag her while they were getting the battery, okay? I mean, it's quite a memory for me. Anyway, she wasn't very happy about putting
Comes to medicine.
It's okay, sweetie. It's okay. It's okay, hon.
She didn't like it very much, but here we are several years later. I want you to hear what the mom has to say.
So I am so happy to see Atalia here today, looking so good and so healthy. We've been able to treat her cavities with medicine over the past 3 years. No needles and no drills. Has that worked out pretty good?
Yeah, it has. It worked really good for her.
Is she a lot happier coming to the dentist now?
Yeah, the first time she came, she was crying quite a bit. Today we were all smiles, huh?
Yes, I remember that. This is a happy visit. Do you think this would work for other children? Sweet. Yes, exactly. Well, thank you for coming to see us, both of you.
Notice that she had improved medically to the point she was no longer on a respirator. She has a little trach scar, but she's getting better. And we never had to, I think in the old days, I would have just taken her to the OR under general anesthesia in this case, and we were able to avoid that. We don't have time to play this video. This is a marvelous story about Christine and Claire, and I'm just going to summarize it. I encourage you to go to MMC Library and watch the interview about Christina. We got a call from this mother who said, I heard that you're using medicine to treat tooth decay. And I have I think she was 11 months old at the time, a young child who I've been told needs to go to the hospital and have crowns placed on her teeth under general anesthesia. And I'm a molecular biologist, and I am familiar with the risks of general anesthesia for young children, and I don't want to do that. So she puts her daughter in a car, drives 1,000 miles. The next day, I talked to her on the phone. They were in my office the next day, okay? And we placed, again, this is the silver nitrate era. We didn't have SDF yet, but we got her mouth open, and we placed silver nitrate on all of the lesions that we found, okay? And it's kind of an interesting story. Then when she turned 4, she was going into preschool, and of course we had some dark staining in the anterior, and Mom was concerned about that. And so at this time, now she'd moved to Seattle, and so we agreed to meet in Central Oregon. This actually is the kitchen of my son's vacation house in Eagle Crest, okay? And we met there. This is John Frischella, pediatric dentist who practices part-time in Oregon and part-time in Maine. He's done more GICs than I have, so we got together and we treated Claire in the kitchen at Eagle Crest, okay? And placed a glass ionomer cement veneer over those dark spots to give her a smile that she could be happy with going to school, okay? And here she is. Here's before, here's after, okay? If this is a problem, fix it, okay? You can do it in your kitchen. It's amazing how many dentists just go ballistic when they see that, okay? It's fixable, all right? Oh, and this is her tooth when it exfoliated at age 6. Mom said, I told Mom, I really want this tooth when it comes out, and she mailed it to me. I mailed it to Jeremy Horst. This tooth has been imaged at the UC Berkeley synchrotron, okay? And what you're seeing here is the pink is silver ions that are still in the enamel. Isn't that incredible? So 4 years later, they're still. And this is a little bit of the GIC that was used to cover the tooth. You can still see it. And there she is now. No shots, no drills, no general anesthesia, nothing, okay? This is another interesting case. So Declan, I actually scheduled him to go to the OR. So this is before I knew about silver nitrate or silver diamine chloride. And I had a 4-month waiting list. I probably had 50 Medicaid kids waiting to go to the OR. And I only got, I think I got 3 OR days a month, okay? So when I heard about silver nitrate, I talked to Declan's mom and I said, why don't we just paint this stuff on all of his cavities and just slow it down? Because he's gonna have to wait 3 months to go into the OR, and I was afraid he was gonna get an abscess. And I said, it'll look awful, okay, but at least we'll disinfect everything. And she said, fine. So this is what happened. We painted on there, and this is what it looked like. Okay, everything's arrested. Just as we got ready to take him to the OR, he lost Medicaid coverage. Okay, and how many Medicaid kids are gonna be able to afford to go to the OR? So we lost track of it, okay? Declan we lost track of it. Well, guess what? He resurfaced. And those teeth are just coming out, exfoliating naturally, okay? And then here he is with his permanent teeth coming in. What's astonishing is that the only intervention I ever did with Declan is paint silver nitrate and fluoride varnish on his teeth once. And here he is multiple years later with a normal, healthy dentition. That's astonishing, really astonishing. So these are the little dark scars that we see, okay? When we paint silver nitrate or silver diamine fluoride, that's normal. Okay, when we have big cavitations, we just stick some glass ionomer cement in there, okay? Just the type of a Band-Aid, okay? Here we are with Dr. Horst and Dr. Rochelle and I. We call it the SMART team. Silver modified atraumatic restorative treatment. That's what SMART is. Okay. And here he is working, you know, he sees, I don't know, 100 kids a day. I don't know how he does it, you know. All knee to knee, treats them all the same. This is what he does. And then when I go to Africa, that's what I do. Same thing. This is an interesting case of a dramatically broken down anterior case that was restored with anterior strip grafts. Easily fixed, okay? We get so worried about this, well, that's what a dental infection that's been arrested looks like, okay? So if you are not okay with that, then fix it. It's not a problem, okay? How about SMART crowns, the Hall crowns? Can you imagine cementing a crown right on top of active decay? Well, it's become and proven to be very effective. So we're always worried about, yeah, but I didn't treat the decay in there, okay? So now we have another approach. If you're worried about the decay, put silver on it. Then cement the crown. So that's what we're calling SMART Hall crowns. Here's an example of a restoration, okay, that was treated with SDF first, and then this is a GIC. Notice that you can see a shadow all the way around it. Most dentists, if they look at that, are going to think you left decay. That is bad, okay? So we have to re-educate ourselves. No, that is not decay. That is silver. And where is a lesion, where is a cavity most likely to break down? At the margin, right? And so where is the silver? At the margin. So it's actually protecting the tooth. So that's actually a good thing.
What would that look like radiographically?
I'm going to come to that. I actually have a good radiograph. I'll show you that. Okay, so this is another dentist that you should pay attention to, Dr. McLean. She's publishing a lot about SDF. You'll see her. And she's got an amazing, you know, very high-end pediatric practice in Scottsdale, Arizona. Okay? And yes, I think she does see a few Medicaid patients, but not many. Okay, so she's treating the most affluent people in Scottsdale, Arizona. What do they want? SDF. It's amazing. Here's an example of a posterior cavitation that she's restored with GIC. Okay, if it's ugly or it's black and there's a hole, fix it. I love this anterior case because this is really challenging. Okay. And I've had so many cases look like this when you just stop the anterior decay. And what I tend to do is just say, well, you know, those teeth are going to come out. Jeanette has figured out how to put a real thin glass ionomer cement veneer over it and just make it look perfect. So she has them come in twice, SDF, arrest, and then she fixes it. Very nice case. What about interproximal lesions? How are you going to treat interproximal lesions? Well, we want to get silver in the interproximal space. And so this technique has been developed of putting floss in between the teeth, okay? Then taking your micro brush with your silver, putting it right on the floss, and pulling the floss through the contact, and so the silver gets into this area. So here are interproximal lesions that have been followed. I think this is 14, 15, 16, and 17, and they have not progressed. Okay, so what does an arrested lesion look like radiographically? It doesn't change. Okay, that's what we want to see. It doesn't change. That means it's inactive. Here's another phenomenon that's interesting. We started to see this over and over again, is we'll see this sort of radio-opaque zone at the surface where we treated the tooth. Now, this has not been proven yet, but the hypothesis is that what we're seeing here is silver. Okay? That's silver in the outermost area of the lesion. Now, we're accustomed to looking for this at the pulp region, right? Because we're seeing secondary, tertiary dentin forming, but we're also seeing this halo around the periphery of the lesion. Okay, so let's go to a couple of projects that we've done around the world, so that you all can go home today. So, in addition to my practice in Kaiser, Oregon, which is, I've been there since 2004, I think, so almost 15 years. And we've been invited to a number of different international locations, and we've been learning and serving, and you know, it's kind of hard to bring together a philanthropic program along with a scientific program, along with a sustainable program. And that's what we're trying to do, is make all of those things happen. The first thing that happened, I published a paper in the California Dental Journal in 2012 about the use of silver nitrate. Somehow, someone in Ecuador read that paper. And so we get a call from the Ministry of Health in Ecuador in 2012, and they said, we'd like to come and see what you're doing. And so 2 dentists from the Ministry of Health came to Kaiser, Oregon, and observed us working in our practice. This is the view out of my operatory, isn't that great? Out on Stats Lake. And this turned into an invitation for us to go to Ecuador and to conduct a pilot program in a rural school in Ibarra, Ecuador. And so this is my team. So Tiffany, I thought was going to be here tonight, but she couldn't come. And I and a few of us went. These are all Ministry of Health dentists, and we trained them how to treat these kids. We also went to a special needs hospital. This is a video of a dentist treating a patient with cerebral palsy. And I think I have to run the video this Okay. So the point is, we want to be able to put everything necessary to treat 100 kids in a rural location in a suitcase, and to be able to go and do that. You see this thing right here? Does anybody know what that is? Does that look like a weed sprayer? Yeah. It is a weed sprayer. My son converted a weed sprayer into a portable compressed air device. So we pump it up and we can dry the teeth, okay? So, and then this thing is full of medicine. And so that's what no decay is. I'm not here to promote no decay. No, you can't get it, but it's a catchy name, isn't it? Okay. All right, then we were invited in 2015 to go to Ghana by this gentleman who is a Swiss citizen that has been named an honorary chief in a tribe in Ghana, and he heard about, I was actually doing a presentation like this, and someone there told him about it, and he said, we need you to come to Ghana. And I said, why? He said, because there are no dentists. Ghana is a country of 30 million people and 200 dentists. So essentially there are no dentists in Ghana. So he thought, of course they need you, right? So we went to Ghana on that assumption. Look at what we found. Oh, first of all, you got to watch this video. Count how many children come out of this place. Going to Ghana was an amazing experience. Beautiful children, and we lined them all up, we examined them, and what do you think we found? No decay. These are the healthiest kids I've ever seen. We did find a couple of them with cavities, and this is one of the children that we treated. show you what treatment looked like.
Because I noticed not all of
Just
them.
genetic,
Okay.
there's just more melanoma.
Everyone does.
Notice the eyewear.
Yeah, you're gonna start
I
something.
don't do it, Marcus. I did that the other day and then it was chaos.
Sorry. Tiffany.
So obviously, we're learning how to do this a little more efficiently. And in this particular case, in rural Ghana, we're teaching the teacher how to do it. Okay? We don't have to worry about competing with the dentist in town. There is not a dentist for 400 miles from this school. Okay? And do we have the ability to teach a teacher how to do this? Yes. And so that's exactly what we were doing. Okay. Okay. So now we went to Bolivia. That was our next invitation. And this is with Sandy Kemper's group, from Seattle. And we work with children all over Bolivia. This is a wonderful interview, which we don't have time to listen to, which I encourage you to go to MMC Library and listen to the dentists themselves that participated in this project. Okay, I will let you listen to this since this is my son telling the story.
Children are by far the most vulnerable part of any global population, yet somehow they are disproportionately affected by the most common disease known to man, tooth decay. We at No Decay decided to partner with the NGO Choice Humanitarian to take a look at the extreme level of tooth decay in Bolivia. And what we saw was absolutely horrendous. These poor children had almost an entire mouth full of decay where their teeth were rotted out completely to the gum line, affecting them on a daily basis. So what would happen if this decay was left untreated? Well, often it leads to major infections and abscesses, which, as you can obviously see, is very uncomfortable and painful for the child, and in some cases can lead to death, which happened to a Baltimore boy in 2007, as reported by the Washington Post. So what really creates this problem of tooth decay? A lot of it has to do with easy access to sugar. And in Bolivia, we identified that candy was being sold both outside and inside of the school. And this problem actually happens in a lot of other countries as well. And like I said, this is not specific to certain countries. This is a global problem. Again, this is the most common infectious disease known to man. Now, the World Dental Federation took data from 1994 to 2014 to create a roadmap of how much decay is in each country at those specific timeframes. Now, in 2009, a publication was done that showed that this problem gets worse each year and will continue to get worse. So how does this really hurt the children? They feel that pain every day, and it affects them by having a difficult time sleeping. They're less productive at school. They're scared about smiling because they're self-conscious. And they're scared of dentists because of the pain associated with traditional dentistry. So without the care, what would happen to them? Well, as you saw, they would get those painful swelling abscesses. The teeth would have to be extracted, which is very traumatic and painful, or even potentially systemic infections or death. We at No Decay feel that the appropriate solution is the medical management of cavities using medicine, which is better than the traditional surgical approach that fails a majority of the time. Back in 1908, G.V. Black, the founding father of dentistry, had identified that silver salts were very effective at preventing the growth of current cavities. And in more modern days, the specific silver salt, called silver diamine fluoride, was demonstrated in a variety of systematic review publications in 2009 and 2012 to be very effective at arresting cavity growth. And a systematic review of clinical trials was done in 2016 showing the same results. In 1996, Western Australia had utilized silver diamine fluoride to treat 400,000 people in their population with a success rate of roughly 100%. This protocol has been adopted here in Oregon by the largest Medicaid provider, which manages 335,000 lives. And in 2013, they talked in front of the Oregon legislature and demonstrated that they had reduced hospital referrals by over 50%, saving the state millions of dollars. And this protocol is actually being taught in dental schools across the United States. So how do you take this protocol outside of a dental practice out into the real world in the jungle? We at No Decay took this technology into a unit dose system such that you have the medicine silver diamine fluoride on one side and fluoride varnish on the other that seals the medicine in and allows it to do its work. We also created the Air Anywhere that allows you to have compressed air without the need for electricity. And as you can see, it's so simple to use that the dentist is over here on the left and a teacher on the right. So with minimal training, they would be able to treat their own children.
So here we are in a school, again, working with children, not in a dental office. The severity of decay that we found in South America, in Ecuador and Bolivia, is just astonishing, shocking. The need of something different. This is back in Bolivia, and a little statement about what these kids are eating.
This is a breakfast provided by the school. All the schools around my country receive a breakfast through the morning. And it usually is sweet cookies and sweet juice or sweet yogurt. This is what the kids get around the country every single day.
Do they have to pay for it, or is it free?
It is free.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So here's a little girl. She's got about 3 cents in one hand, and she's buying more sugar water. Okay. It was astonishing to be in this school and see the amount of sugar being sold inside the school and outside the school and being given away free. There's no question why these children have such advanced tooth decay. It's really, really sad. So when we first arrived in Bolivia, we surveyed how many of the children were complaining of mouth pain. They didn't know what it was caused from, okay? It's caries related mouth pain. 50% of the children said, I have pain in my mouth every day, especially when I eat, okay? We treated everybody in the school with SDF, and what happened? We came back at 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months, and we measured caries arrest, we measured pain, total elimination of mouth pain. It's a huge difference for these children in the developing world. So it's another, you've already seen this work, but they're just wonderful children. Here's the important thing. We have data, okay? We didn't just parachute in, do a bunch of good stuff, and come back and tell the story about it. I put a lot of energy over the past 10 years of trying to document our journey, okay? And so we have data. This is Sharon Golightly. She's a dental hygienist with a doctoral degree who is in charge of our charting. And this is kind of an interesting metric here. Can you tell that the blue end and the red end are of different lengths? Okay, that's actually a piece of data. These are the charts over here. We're from exams with everything's red to now everything's blue to arrest. We have hundreds and hundreds of children that we're tracking now. We're now at 3 years. I just got back from Bolivia. We have 3 years of solid data. This is going to be published this year, so watch for it. Okay, and the more important thing is we have the data, but we have the smiles to go along with it. This is Sandy Kemper in her program. This is what's astonishing. In Ghana, only 30% of the children had any evidence of decay whatsoever. 70% of the children that we saw in rural Ghana had no sign of decay. Okay, and for the ones that we did find decay, we had to really look for it. They had an average of 1.3 lesions. Compare that with Bolivia. 98% of the children had decay, active decay. And the average number of lesions was 8. It was not uncommon to see children with 15 or more cavities. Astonishing. You know, why is that? So we need to ask ourselves, why is this true in Ghana and why is this true in Bolivia? Okay? We don't have all the answers yet, but we have a tool to help us treat. Okay? There aren't, as Karen Soko Gutierrez said, we don't have enough dentists. That's never going to be true. And as my son Marcus said, the problem of tooth decay is a growing problem globally. That's not going to change during our lifetime. Okay? So what can we do? All right. So why is this and what should we do? Well, this is my granddaughter Stella, and Stella's about this tall now. This is an old picture. But Stella's never had a cavity, and I don't think Stella is ever going to have a cavity. I'm really motivated to make sure that is true, okay? I want Stella to grow up like the kids I saw in Ghana, not the kids I saw in Bolivia. although I very much enjoyed going back, and we're going back in September, because there's a new school. So the one problem with this project in Bolivia is that we didn't have a control group, okay? This isn't research, right? We're humanitarians, we're doing good work, we're not experimenting on kids, right? I have to say that to everybody. But we didn't have a control group. Well, the last time I was there, a principal from a school in a neighboring school came over and said, how come you've been treating these kids and not our kids? So I usually am criticized for, quote, experimenting on people. This time I'm being criticized for not experimenting on them. And I immediately said, can we come tomorrow? Okay, yeah, we'll be there tomorrow. Okay, we got to examine all the kids first, all right? So we examined them all, and I said, we'll be back in September and we'll start treating them. But what does that exam represent? A control group. We have a group of 400 children that were treated intensively for 3 years to arrest all of their caries, to control their pain, etc. And now we have a control group to compare. Now we promised that we're going to treat that group, so we're coming back and we're going to treat everybody the same so that we're ethically performing our duty. But nonetheless, preguntas? Okay.
When you were talking about doing the silver blood treatment and then having them back to do cosmetic, if they want that covered up, is there a minimum amount of time you have to wait in between that you recommend, or does it matter?
That's a really good question, in terms of how much time does it take to arrest and what should you wait? I don't think that we really know for sure. And having done literally thousands of teeth and watched them, and I wanted to shorten the time span. I believe that you want to at least wait a couple of weeks, okay, between your intervention. And so where we were doing like every 2 weeks, we would do a treatment, and then at 6 to 8 weeks, we would do the glass ionomer cement. People who didn't want to wait that long, we're kind of compressing it so that we're doing like a treatment every 3 days, okay? So once again, when you put the varnish on, you're going to protect the SDF treatment for maybe 24 hours. That's it, and it's gone, okay? So you probably can do a treatment every 24 hours, but I haven't quite gotten to that point, all right? But I want to do 2 or 3 treatments and then the GIC. So the minimum time frame would be like within 1 week. And then we've got John Frashella, who has more experience than I do, who does it all at once. And he's quite convinced that you can apply SDF and put GIC right on top of it. And John has done thousands and thousands of cases. Okay? And John is a great guy, and I don't think that he would lie to me. But he does not collect data. Okay? He's a clinician. So I can't really promote that until I have some data to show. Yes?
How much more effective is the SDF than the silver nitrate?
Yeah, great question. Comparing silver nitrate, silver diamine fluoride. So again, having done thousands of teeth, I've noticed there's a big difference between the 25% silver nitrate and the 50% silver nitrate. So I was unaware that silver nitrate was available in a 50% version. It is. And when we switched from 25 to 50%, I saw quicker and more effectiveness, okay? And there also was a period of time where we weren't doing the varnish. And so we had some failures. And what caused me to think this through is the teeth that failed, I actually sectioned them and I looked at them under the microscope and I tried to see why on earth did parts of the lesion become arrested and parts not become arrested. And that's kind of what led me to the idea of let's cover it up by varnish to minimize the saliva contamination. So for instance, I have more failures on mandibular teeth than maxillary teeth. Go figure that one out. Okay, so I decided it must have something to do with the amount of saliva contamination. That went away when we started doing the fluoride varnish. Now back to your question. I don't believe there's any difference between 50% silver nitrate fluoride and fluoride varnish than SDF. Okay? Now, having ionic fluoride and silver together just makes more sense to me. So in my office, am I still using silver nitrate? No, I'm not. I'm using the SDF. Why? There's a couple of reasons. Number one, I think just it makes more sense to me as I think about how it's probably working on the ionic level. Number two, there's more published literature about SDF, right? So if someone challenges me, why are you doing this? If I'm saying, well, I'm the only dentist in America using silver nitrate, that doesn't give me a lot of strength, okay? If someone says, why are you using silver diamine fluoride? Well, I have 100 papers to back me in. So we're using silver diamine fluoride.
Do you need to put the fluoride varnish on after the SDF also, or only the sodium or nitrate?
We still put the fluoride varnish after we use SDF.
Okay.
Because the reason is not to add more fluoride, okay? I don't think you can overdo it, but nonetheless, it isn't to add fluoride varnish. It's to eliminate the taste and to protect the treated lesion from saliva. Way in the back there. Okay, in the back.
So I take my silver diamine, I put it in a little well, and I have my micro brush, and
Yep.
I'm doing per tooth and drawing. Sometimes the second, sometimes the fourth tooth, the well has some saliva in it, there's blood on the micro brush, there's a lot of things happening. Should I stop doing that and do every micro brush every tooth? Is that contamination?
So it's a great question. What I would recommend, because it's so hard, especially with a wiggly kid, okay, to control this, remember that the silver ion has to get in contact with the bacteria, period. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get silver ion in the presence of bacteria. We want the silver going into the cytoplasm of the bacteria and killing the cell, okay? If that silver ion is going anywhere else, it isn't doing that. So whenever you have contamination, I don't care whether it's in the well or wherever it is, okay, the silver is likely to end up in the saliva or in the contamination or the blood or wherever. It's not going to end up there. So if I would start over if I can see that my situation is contaminated. And you were talking about a drop, you know, so you throw it away, you get a new drop, so what?
What do you typically charge for this?
So we started out, of course, there wasn't even a code, all right? So we went for many years just, you know, I think our office charged like $18 or something.
Per tooth?
Just, no, per treatment, okay? Just to try and cover our costs. I think we're up closer to 30 somewhere, okay? And we have the 1350, is it 1354 code? Okay. So we actually have a code, and there's some reimbursement that's coming along. But nobody's gonna make money putting out the fires, okay? So we're doing that for a different reason. I'm happy in my office just to get my costs covered, okay? And then we'll have a certain number of kids that they just don't do anything else, like Declan, until their permanent teeth come in, hopefully in a healthy environment. Hopefully we've changed the ecological catastrophe that Marsh talks about. In other kids that they want or need restorative, then we have that whole piece, and we charge whatever our fee schedule would have been. Yes.
So if you're dealing with an elderly that has an area where they're not in pain, they're wanting to tooth out, there's a big cavity or maybe not a full-blown cavity, and we're going to do silver diamine treatment, you're going to clean it, fit in. We use it at our office, and we do free treatments. So if there's an elderly that have a hard time getting there or on a bus or need someone to bring them, it's ideal, like I think how we do it is like wait for them to come back for next, if they're on a 3-month or 4-month or 6-month, then we apply it a second time, then again a third time, maybe even a fourth time. So is that too far to wait?
I don't think so. I mean, you just have to do with what is reasonable, okay? And I'm in hopes that there will be some dental hygienists that decide that they want to go out into the community and provide the service for people where they're at. so that they don't have to come to the dentist, because there's a lot of people that just can't,
Yeah, right.
okay?
And then one more quick,
Yeah.
for kids, what about them too? So don't wait for 6 months for them to do a second treatment, bring them in like a few weeks later, 2 weeks?
With children, I'm a little more aggressive. Why? Because the enamel's so thin and the pulps are so big, and the process, we want to stop it as quickly as possible. And so I'm more likely to push the child to come in 2 or 3 times within the next 2 weeks. You know,
Okay.
try and just throw everything against the fire, stop it. With this, with an elder, I'm less concerned. The question? Okay, in the back.
So I know your focus this evening was regarding Perry's arrest, but you also mentioned that the label treatment is for desensitization. When you're having a sensitive patient, just from your personal experience, are you noticing any staining whatsoever if you're applying it just for desensitization, or will you only see the staining when it's binding to the Perry section?
Thanks for that question. So with respect to staining, I have never seen staining when you place SDF on normal healthy enamel for whatever reason, okay? Never. We do know that the silver is in the enamel because it's been sectioned and studied, okay? But it doesn't cause a darkening. Now that's because the darkness comes from silver oxide and silver sulfide compounds, which happen when you have demineralized tooth structure.
What about the dentin, right? So if you're having sensitivity below your enamel and your dentin, and you're putting, can you put it in your dentin?
You absolutely can.
And then will that stain the dentin?
SDF is going to stain all dentin, okay? And cementum. I've seen it not stain enamel unless it's been demineralized, but I've always seen it stain cementum and always stain dentin. But I'm less concerned about that. I think your question had to do with sensitivity. How close can you get to the nerve, okay? I've gotten pretty close, but I'm always nervous. I know how caustic this stuff is. It's pH 11, okay? We don't want it to fall in our eyes, do we? Okay, so if I have less than 1 millimeter of healthy dentin between the lesion and the pulp, I am less likely to use SDF. So if the child comes in and the tooth hurts, radiographically it's 1 millimeter or less, I'm more likely to do a pulpectomy or just do the more aggressive treatment. Although I will tell you that I've been surprised how often I expected to have a call the next day saying, you treated that tooth and it hurts now. And I've essentially never had that happen. But maybe it's because I'm pretty conservative. Yes.
Well, you did say in Bolivia, all the children had pain, you treated all of them, and then none of them had pain, so.
Yeah, it's astonishing. But again, that's 3 and 6 months later doing the same survey, and we're just throwing SDF on fire. Yes.
So are you saying that SDF always stains all cementum or only decayed cementum?
So
I'm confused about what you're
are
saying.
you,
Like if
are you
have
speaking with
someone-
respect to dentin or cementum?
I thought you said both stain.
So cementum, just by its nature, is demineralized, okay? It's mostly collagen and it's not remotely microscopically like enamel. So I can't say 100%, all right? But my experience is if you put SDF on cementum, you're gonna get a dark gray
Okay, so
halo.
if you have a patient that's healthy, that's young, that presents with generalized recession and has cold sensitivity from generalized recession, you would not put that on there because that would likely all stain.
So if it had recession, okay, this is what I probably would do. I probably would cover it up with GIC on the 3rd visit, okay? And get rid of the stain that way, because I want silver in there. I want it to protect from bacterial invasion in the future. Is there another question? Yeah?
So endodontic avoidance, trying to remove the decay on a patient, you're close to the nerve. Concern you have is the caustic nature of the SDF. Is there any evidence or any papers that show that they can treat that, arrest the decay without removing all of it, and then place a restoration in. I mean, seems to me that that's a viable approach to avoiding endodontic therapy for even adults.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those gaps in our knowledge right now. I mean, there are clinicians that have experience with this question, but we don't have data, that's published that I know of yet on this issue. But I know that I've done a lot fewer root canals than I would otherwise have done by having this in my armamentarium, and I'm sure that my patients are happy about that.
And you said it's light active, right? So since me, I noticed too is that painting on areas, it's not at all. I'm wondering when it's going to turn black, and if I'm using a light cure material, so we have light cure, everything's black.
It does quickly, yes. So if you're restoring with a light curable material and you put silver in there and you put the light in, boom, you're going to see the blackness right away. Now, you would have seen that a week from now anyway, okay? And this is another reason why I like GIC, because it acts as an opaquing agent much better than resins do. And there are in some cases where we'll end up doing 3 steps. We'll do silver, we'll do a GIC opaquing layer, and a resin on top of that for the nice enamel-like finish.
What, I was just in a conference and they, I think it was Henry Schein that had a new product that didn't have the black,
Okay, so that's the Riva Star product from Australia.
What are your thoughts on that? I know they said it's more expensive than the Advantage of Rest, but I don't know anything else about it.
Okay, so thanks for bringing that to my attention. So soon after Safarite was developed in Japan, Graham Craig in Australia developed a parallel product, a silver fluoride, not a silver diamine fluoride, it's a silver fluoride, the amine is gone. Okay, and so a whole long chemical discussion about why that is. But he came up with the idea of, well, if we put potassium iodide on top of the silver fluoride, then we'll get a silver iodide precipitate, which is white. And so, I mean, he's a chemist and a dentist, and he just said, let's do that to solve the black. Okay. However, all right, I'll go back to my, why do we put silver there? Because we're trying to get the silver to go into the bacterium and kill the bacterium, okay? So if we've created silver iodide precipitate, you have sequestered the silver into that, and the silver is no longer available for the bioactive reason why you did it. So I am not a fan of the 2-step piece, and I think I would rather address the color change by putting GIC on top. Yes?
Is this changing the overall flora of the mouth, and for how long does that last?
Right, so Jeremy Horst is one of the scientists that's really looking into that. I mean, I personally would like to know if there's a difference in the microbiology of the kids in Ghana and the kids in Bolivia. That's one question, okay? And then the next question is, okay, whether it's in Ghana or wherever it is, okay, what's the microbiology of the mouth of this patient before and after treatment? So that data is being collected, and we don't have a definite answer to that. Now, Jeremy in the video said they studied and found that it dramatically reduced the amount of bacteria in the treated tooth, but it didn't really change the spectrum of bacteria. Now that's like one study that he's done. That needs to be repeated on a population level. And there are all kinds of people that say, oh my God, you're killing the good bacteria. Really? Which ones are they? You know, I mean, how do you, we don't know anything about 80% of the bacteria that are in your mouth at all, so tell me which ones are the good ones, you know? So I tend to be, I don't want bacteria on the tooth, period. Okay, if painting a little silver prevents bacteria of any type from colonizing and living on the tooth, great. But that's just my biased opinion.
What about,
yes,
you mentioned that patient that had the acute gingivitis. What about patients that have acute gingivitis?
So this issue of can we use SDF to treat gingivitis, okay? It has been noted as a side effect of caries treatment on multiple patients by multiple clinicians. It's now risen to the level of interest, and I am aware of at least 2 studies that are being designed right now to look at SDF as an anti-gingivitis tool. Now you can imagine this, if you put SDF on healthy enamel and you don't get a stain, but you do get an anti-gingivitis effect, that would be huge. So we don't have the answer to that yet, but I think next year we might have some data.
Steve?
Yes.
So, you know, sealants are controversial. You see this dark, this fissure with a dark stain in there. I mean, is that decay? Is that stain? The SDF, I mean, could you use that in those dark lesions?
It's an excellent question. And, you know, when we see a dark spot in a fissure, okay, I was trained to get out my drill and drill it out, make it white, put it nice. Okay. I'm more likely now to say, I don't really know what's in there. I can't see it. There probably is bacteria doing some mischief down there. Why don't I send in the paratroopers, okay? Let's put some silver in there and make it darker. That's even better, okay? So I'm more likely to treat that suspected lesion with SDF and then cover it up with a GIC seal. But that's just me. And it seems to work really well. So I mean, we've done thousands of these, and I would say if it wasn't working, we'd know it, okay? Because we'd have a lot of failures. And I did say that I did have failures when I first started doing this. And I didn't know why. But I think it's because we weren't doing reapplications and we were getting saliva contamination. We figured that out, we changed our protocol, and all those failures stopped. Well, thanks again. You've been a great audience.
Thank you.
Wait a minute, I gotta get a picture of you guys. I gotta prove to somebody that I was here. Thank you.